We took it all. We brought them to our land. An endless night, ember hot and icy cold. The rage of the earth. We made this curse. Carved it in the blood on our backs. We did not see. We could not, but she did. And in the end...
What will I become?
Senua's Saga. Hellblade 2.
Play it now with Game Pass.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, you know, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Okay, round two. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, sorry. We were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right. ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Serie A Chronicles is a Media Chronicles production.
Maurizio Stirpe now. The Frosinone president knows it's his side who now have no margin for error. Were Empoli to score against Roma again, then Frosinone would drop into the relegation zone. Now Nyong. And Nyong has scored what is surely the winner! Survival is in reach now! And by Nyong, with possibly the most important goal of his career. Empoli are back above Frosinone because they lead against Roma, and there's barely any time remaining at the Castellani. How on earth has this backfired for Frosinone? They were the highest placed of the three teams beginning this evening. Udinese are safe, Frosinone beaten, and if and when the full-time whistle goes at the Castellani and it remains Empoli 2, Roma 1, then it's Frosinone who will be relegated. Fabio Cannavaro has saved Udinese. Keenan Davis with the only goal. It is a great escape for Udinese, but you have to feel for Frosinone. They were 2.5 minutes away from staying up.
And it's all over. Empoli are safe. Empoli survive for another season in Serie A. The most dramatic of finishes, with Mbaye Nyong scoring late in stoppage time. The Azzurri have done it.
They think it's all over, and actually it still technically isn't, because Atalanta still need to play Fiorentina, but the season is as good as over in Serie A. All the important stuff is tied up. 18 teams are all finished. We just have that one delayed game left to go. All the drama of a relegation fight that went down to the wire was resolved this weekend, and I can't wait to talk through it with Patrick Kendrick and Mina Rizuki. But before we do that, guys, the season's over. What is your overriding emotion right now, the day after the end of the Serie A season? Mina?
Thank bleep. It was fun in the beginning. It sort of stopped being fun when we started to predict what was going to happen towards the end. And then it was very emotional, to be honest with you. I mean, I spent most of my weekend crying, and I don't know why, but it was sort of seeing Alexandro crying, and the fact that he had limited his comments on Instagram for the last year because of the amount of abuse he got from Juventus fan. And then you realize like how much it actually meant to him. Seeing Stefano Pioli and Rafael Leao get so emotional over him leaving as well. Tony Cruz, but you guys don't care about that. Just different things. You know, Stephen Zhang's letter to the fans was really sad to read as well, because you really felt like he loved the club. And I don't know, it was a little bit like a nostalgia, right? Like just a lot of great people leaving, you know, even Giroud. And But and also Di Francesco, I felt really, really sorry for Frosinone to be relegated. The way that he was embraced by Cannavaro and Fabio and Paolo was really sad. But I guess though on the other hand of it, it was really great for Davide Nicola as well. So highs and lows. I would like more excitement next season, but I don't know. At least one thing I can guarantee is that we're back to being the most competitive league in Europe.
Patrick?
Fatigue tinged with relief, I think, my two sort of overriding emotions on this Monday morning. Relief that the long season is over. Fatigue because it was quite draining. But yeah, I think it was very exciting. And I actually quite liked the fact that everything had been resolved in terms of the title race and the European places so that we could just focus and give the three teams battling to avoid relegation, give them their day in the sun. And I thought that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was a bundle of conflicted emotions this weekend. I definitely was so happy for Davide Nicola when Empoli scored. It's hard not to be swept up in that story. 5 different clubs now he's managed to finish 17th in Serie A with. It's an extraordinary thing to do. At the same time, you're jumping from there to Frosinone and Eusebio Di Francesco and the project he's had. And I thought they were really good yesterday to lose to Udinese when they'd outplayed them and then have that sucker punch at the end of the game where it felt like they were going to be staying up anyway, and then you hear the news from Empoli and you're going down. You could really see how it affected him. We will get to those games. Before we start properly, just want to let all of our listeners know this is our last main show of the season. There will probably be a voice note after the Europa Conference game, Europa Conference League final with Fiorentina and Olympiacos on Wednesday, but this may be our last main one of the regular season. We're still working out exactly what we do around the Euros, what we do or don't do. But just a note to the Chronicles Tifosi patrons that all fees will be paused during the off season. So we'll definitely not be charging you while we're not putting out content. We would not do that. So just wanted to let you know all that. Let's go to the classic end of season multi-screen drama. Empoli against Roma. Let's start there with the team that stayed up. Davide Nicola reaches into his bag of magic tricks, which basically every time this season, during the last part of the season, the bag of magic tricks is Mbaye Niang, who has, I think, only started 5 games since joining in January, but all 6 of his goals, which, by the way, is enough to make him Empoli's top scorer, 6 goals. All 6 of them have come off the bench, including this one in the 92nd minute to get them across the line against Roma. Did we see it coming, Patrick, or was this a surprise when it happened?
No, I thought it was very predictable, dare I say. I said this before, it backfired a bit when Frosinone lost 5-0 at home to Inter in their penultimate home match. But I just feel when a team has huge motivation, as Empoli did, and another team is playing for nothing, and Roma knew they were 6th, whatever happened. They couldn't be caught by Lazio. They couldn't catch up to any of the teams ahead of them. They also saw Atalanta play in the earlier game and knew that Atalanta's 3-0 win over Torino meant that any very slight glimmer of hope that they had of qualifying for the Champions League, with Atalanta finishing wherever it was they needed to finish 5th. I'm so confused at this stage. That had all been dashed. So I think it would take... I'm not going to question Roma's professionalism. I just think it's the end of a very long season. They've been in the Europa League. They made it as far as the semi-finals of that competition. They've had a very long, taxing Serie A season. They've had 2 coaches, 2 very different coaches, Mourinho and De Rossi. And you're up against a side that's playing at home and that needs to win feasibly to stay up. And that's exactly what they did. And especially given what was going on elsewhere, there was that scenario whereby there could have been a 2-legged relegation playoff had Frosinone won and Empoli drew. But once the news filtered through from the Stirpe that actually the team that was winning was Udinese and not Frosinone, Empoli knew that them drawing 1-1 against Roma was not good enough. And then we saw that concerted effort for them to, well, I say we saw, I was commentating on the other game. So I'm told that there was a concerted effort there, and not Roma's finest hour on the defending, but Mbaye Niang, he's done it again.
He really has been extraordinary. I always just come back to Niang when he first showed up at Milan, and he was lightning in a bottle, wasn't he? He was so fast and he was so exciting. And I always think about that Champions League tie, Milan-Barcelona, where Milan were leading 2-0 from the first leg, and Yang had a chance to make it. I think it was 3-0 aggregate. It wasn't 3-1, but it might have been 3-1 when he had his chance to score and he hits the post, and then instead Milan get walloped 4-0 and go out. And I just think of that as one of those sliding door moments for that season, but perhaps also in some sense for his whole career, because he went on to have this slightly odd journeyman situation. He's had some success along the way. He's been in France, he's been in Turkey, he's been in Saudi, some successful seasons for sure. But I do feel like back in Italy, at least, he's sort of been this forgotten figure between the chapter in Milan, and then you just get these odd postcards from afar, almost like him playing rock, paper, scissors with Mario Balotelli to see who's going to take a penalty in a game in Turkey, and you think, whatever happened to that guy? So it's fun having him back and doing things. Mina, I do feel like we need to do a little bit of just Davide Nicola love, because if you think about everything he's gone through these last few years, in 2019 it was a Genoa team that were bottom when they hired him in mid-season, got them 17th. Salernitana next, bottom when they signed him, finished 17th. Then it was Torino. Torino weren't bottom when they signed him, but still got them to 17th. And have I done those all in order? I think it was then Salernitana. I might have got the order just wrong then. But anyway, 4 clubs before this one. Then this one, where he comes in mid-season, and they had, let me just find my numbers. They were 19th this time, but they obviously just fired Aurelio Andreazzoli, who was already their second manager of this campaign. At the point when Nicola took over, this team had 13 points from 20 games, and it had scored 11 goals. Pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah, I still think Salernitana was probably his best performance to save from relegation, and that was for me like something I wouldn't have expected at the time, because it was just so poor. So to extract anything from that Salernitana was truly magnificent. This remains to be so. They had a 55% relegation rate, and they were analyzing statistically and according to AI all the percentages of who was going to go down, and in comparison to Frosinone and Udinese, everyone had their money on Empoli. Now, interestingly, I also do a betting show, and we were looking at the odds for Empoli to win this match against Roma, and it was so high. So it was like everyone was convinced Empoli was going to win this match. So I think that tells you something about what Davide Nicola's reputation alone signifies, and how much people believed in Empoli's ability. Or it could just be that they didn't believe in Roma. There's a little bit of that. Yes, because a lot of money started to come in when we, there's one thing, Pellegrini wasn't starting, right? There was no Lukaku, no Dybala, no Paredes, who had gotten a red card. So it wasn't exactly the best Roma. And also we've started to notice, even as soon as De Rossi was announced, Roma were not in an optimum condition on a fitness level. And you've started to see them sort of slowly show you how gassed, how exhausted that they have been. And obviously I think this has had an effect on their performances, especially because De Rossi plays a different style of football that requires you to be completely concentrated. So there's a mental fatigue and there's a physical fatigue, I think, when you look at how the team is performing. And I sort of blame that, because when they have been at their best, I've seen Roma perform a lot better. So there is, and it's exactly what Patrick says. It's the end of the season; they've got nothing left to play for. Empoli is just absolutely desperate at this point. So, and we know that Davide Nicola can do something.
Support for Serie A Chronicles is brought to you by Manscaped, who are the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Shaving your jewels doesn't have to be risky business anymore, thanks to the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. This trimmer is all about keeping things smooth and safe, so you can trim with confidence. Treat your boys down there and join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by going to manscaped.com to get 20% off plus free shipping with code Serie A. With Manscaped, it's easy grooming, no surprises.
We took it all. We brought them to our land. An endless night, ember hot and icy cold. The rage of the earth. We made this curse. Carved it in the blood on our backs. We did not see. We could not, but she did. And in the end, what will I become?
Senua's Saga. Hellblade 2.
Play it now with Game Pass.
Okay, round 2. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right. ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
I do want to bring up a point that
I
I think
very
is...
quickly mean to interrupt you saying, because I feel bad to be one saying, of course, his first great escape was Crotone, which is the one which I missed off because I was going through all of his mid-season joining. That was the one, of course, at Crotone, where he marked it with his famous cycle ride all the way back up to Turin to the place where his son was killed 2 years before. So that was the most famous of all, perhaps. But he has had 4 mid-seasons since then and 5 in total, finishing 17th place.
Yeah, Crotone was truly a magical journey. I just want to tell you about Roma, just one thing, yeah? 3 seasons, right? The last 3 seasons. Last 3 seasons, they have got 63 points in all 3. In all 3, 18 wins, 9 draws, and 11 losses. It's deja vu. I have never, it's incredible that for 3 seasons in a row, they've had everything be exactly the same on that level.
And sixth and sixth, I think, as well, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's diabolical numbers.
So nothing to be improved, nothing. Although, listen, in their defense, yeah, like I know there's been a lot that's come in, because they do have the highest wage. And when Mourinho used to complain about that, right, I used to always be like, come on, you have the 3rd highest wage bill. But I do want to defend one thing. Like sometimes people think that the money means greatness, but you look at this team and it's really below par. Like it's not one that you should be giving the 3rd highest wage bill to. So I think sometimes I think maybe they have reached their level. Obviously, Atalanta always manages to exceed expectations. But generally speaking, on a normal level, I do think Roma need to better invest if they want to make Champions League and not maybe they're just paying too much, because you look at the value of some of these players, it's not good enough. There's only 2 or 3 that you would say are good enough. But I'm not sure about if this team is mediocre for me.
How confident are we still in De Rossi and in this club moving forward next season? I think there's some really interesting decisions coming up this summer. There's 1 or 2 really great discoveries they've had this season, right? I mean, there's Villar in goal. Absolutely. It looks like he's going to be doing that job for them for a while and doing it well. But overall, as Mina's just hinted at, there is a lot on that wage bill. They're going to have to shift some of it. Some of it's going to be easy to shift. Lukaku, almost certainly, we don't expect to see back in Rome next season. But Patrick, I know Mina has been enthusiastic about De Rossi previously. I'm interested to know how you feel about De Rossi now that we've had not just the initial bump, but we've got to the end of the season with him.
Well, that's exactly the point. I think he has everything to prove because the initial bump has worn off. And it's always hard to ascertain how much of it was that initial bounce and then how much of it was actually his tactical excellence and his ability to set up a team and motivate players and improve players. And what I find is interesting is Miles Villar has been actually considered as a De Rossi discovery. But ironically, he actually started Mourinho's last game in charge, which was the defeat at Milan. So technically, you could even attribute that discovery to Mourinho as his last great act as Roma boss. I don't know. I mean, I think if you were to compare the two, and obviously that's always going to be the way that De Rossi is considered until or unless he is at Roma for several years and the memory of Mourinho starts to fade. But it's always going to be that dichotomy, I think, isn't it? It's going to be Mourinho or De Rossi. And I've even noticed it every time Roma don't get a result now. I mean, we should take what is said on social media with a pinch of salt. I think we saw that again this weekend, and I'm sure we'll get onto that when talking about Alexandro and Stefano Pioli, amongst others. But it is quite interesting every time that Roma don't get a result on Twitter and on YouTube. There are all these comments from some of the Mourinho fanboys saying, "Oh, thank God De Rossi was Roma's saviour," and all of this sort of stuff. So I have chuckled at that, to be honest. But yeah, I'd be very interested to see. I think De Rossi's going to be given a bit of leeway because I think there's going to be a huge rebuild for Roma over the summer. That could work out very well. It could also be very challenging. So I'm curious to see what happens with De Rossi. I think he's definitely got the clout. He looks the part, says the right things, he communicates very well, but remains to be seen whether he can improve this team beyond the current level, which, as Mina has just eloquently expressed, is the same and has been for 3 years.
Let's get back to Empoli quickly. It needs to be said, this is their first time ever they're going to have a 4th consecutive season in Serie A, so it's already a historic feat for them to be this consistently in Serie A. I think they've had come through some pretty significant losses over the course of the season in terms of players departing. Obviously, everyone knows about Vicario going to Tottenham and showing how good he can be. Ilya Caprile, who came in to replace him, has actually been pretty good. They got off to a bit of a rocky start. I think he had a bad game against Verona right at the start of the season. Then he was out for a month with an ankle injury. So he got off to a rough start, but I think he ended the season much stronger. The bigger issues for them have been up front all the way through this season, and selling Baldanzi in the middle of the season just when it looked like he might be breaking out obviously didn't help. But they did bring in Nyang, who was on a loan, but my understanding is they have the option to extend that by a year, which could certainly be something you would expect them to do. Alberto Cerri was the other player they signed in the middle of the season. His time there slightly disrupted by injury. I think it's very hard to have a confident say on how they'll go forward, but I do think we all probably believe Davide Nicola deserves a chance to start a season rather than just end one. Some previous stints when he started a season haven't always gone all that well, but you can't say he hasn't earned it after yet another miracle. Let's go to the other relegation game this weekend, Frosinone against Udinese. It finished, as we said, 1-0 to Udinese. It was an Englishman, Keenan Davis, who joined from Watford, who came off the bench and scored his first goal of the season to decide this one, with the help, I should say, of, I thought, really good target man work from Lorenzo Luca inside the box. Honestly, poor Frosinone is my biggest feeling on this one. They were good in this game. They haven't been all season. Obviously, they wouldn't be where they are, but they had a lot of chances and a number of saves by Okoye from Udinese, including some that probably looked a bit more dramatic than they really were, but some that really were good saves. And hard not to have some emotional feeling for Di Francesco as he was being consoled by Cannavaro at full time. How do we feel about both the Cannavaro beginning and also Frosinone's chance of bouncing straight back? Mina? You can pick either, whichever one you'd rather talk about.
It's just that I guess the one thing that if I'm to talk about Frosinone over the season is that they have been so fun to watch from an attacking point of view.
Yeah.
And that now has become more important than anything in the world, you know, like it's like so often I have to feel like I'm reminding people that football is you have to do two things in a football match, which is defend and attack. But now the only thing people seek is to attack. And that is what I think Frosinone at the end of the day, when you look at their defensive statistics, it's just the worst, right? So only Salernitana and Sassuolo have been worse. So if you look at that, in the end, the three worst defenses are the three that have been relegated, and that's just something that we don't pay attention to. And Di Francesco's always had this problem when it's come to defenses. His teams always play well going forward, but defensively they haven't. Stirpe, who is the president of Frosinone, was really distraught afterwards when he was talking about it. I felt very sad for him because it's a very well-run club and they wanted to have the sustainable project that did revolve around youth. And as he mentioned, sometimes with youngsters, they don't perform when you need them to, which is, you know, that efficiency that sometimes you require from the experienced talent, right? Like there's a lot of times when Candreva will come in and do something extraordinary and that will save Salernitana, although not too often, but Sassuolo, not too often this season. But, you know, how much of a loss has Berardi been for Sassuolo, right? Even if they've had other talented individuals like Loriente, but it's Berardi that you would always look to. And I think that's the important thing that perhaps Frosinone may have missed. But for me, it is the fact that I think that they're defensively very naive. The team played in a very naive manner throughout, which was a lot of fun to watch. I was surprised by this, in all honesty, largely because they were playing at home. And there's one thing that you bet on is Frosinone to score a goal at home. Maybe not win, but score a goal at home. They've always been so magnificent at home. And so
they hit the woodwork twice. So
yeah. And it's like you said, there was a really good goalkeeping, you know, performance there. So it's one that you wouldn't have expected. So watching Difra be so upset, it was sad to watch. But I also think that I'm glad it's not Udinese going down as well, because for me they are somewhat of an institute in Serie A now. You know, this was a team that was pushing top four, that had managed to make it, and it was so fun to watch. And there's been a massive slide, right, in the way that they have been performed, and it was really unusual to see them there. But if I was going to have to pick a team, I'm sorry, it would have been Empoli. So I'm quite surprised, but yeah. I mean, I guess at the end with Frosinone, I do think that they have enough to come back up. So I'm not too upset about it at all.
Just speaking about the Frosinone thing, it's actually ironic because everyone says that Di Francesco teams can't defend. They actually went into this game on the back of 4 clean sheets from their previous 5 clean sheets from their previous 7. So they had actually built a platform there. They were starting to keep clean sheets. And I thought it was a very good performance. They never really looked like conceding. It was just that one moment, apart from a couple of nervy moments from the start. Polirola made a couple of mistakes. But aside from the goal, they looked very solid. It didn't look like Udinese were going to score at all. And Okoye played excellently. I think the 3 saves were outstanding, in particular the one from the Okoli header. They hit the bar with a free kick from Soleil. The other one that hit the post, Brescianini, it was never really going in. But I just think that's what football comes down to, is the big moments, really, the big games. And all they needed to do was avoid defeat. And once you don't score, you need to make sure.
What clean sheets? Because did they not? I'm trying to look at that. They lost to Udinese. They won against Monza, but they conceded 5 against
They had
Inter.
4 clean sheets in their previous 5 games, 5 clean sheets in their previous 7.
One of them, Salernitana and Empoli. It's not really great, right? Like, okay, but I mean, I wouldn't say that. Like, it's hard to judge it when it's the last 5 games of the season. 2 of them are like
I think one of them was a goalless draw against Bologna, was it not?
Mm-hmm.
I can't see
and we've
that.
been waxing lyrical about Bologna.
No, there's not Bologna in the last 6. So am I like dreaming? But I can't see
It might
Bologna.
be 5 in the last 7.
So it's 0-0 against Torino.
I think it's
3-0 against Salernitana.
I think we're picking hairs, but it's 8 games ago, I think.
No, but I just don't think that's like they're still not defensively good. Come on, like that's a weird thing to say. Like towards the end, that they didn't concede against teams that don't care anymore. That for them to have started building a platform. I'm not sure.
Well, he switched to a back 3 and they started keeping clean sheets and they started to get results which kept them alive until the final day. I think it was absolutely a concession that he could no longer go gung-ho anymore and play a back 4. It was all about the back 3 with Liroda, Romagnoli and Okoli. And that's why players like Monterisi, who'd been previously part of the back 4, weren't getting a look in. I was very impressed with the way Di Francesco actually sort of did away with the way he was approaching things, and he had been considered this dogmatic coach, 4-3-3, gung-ho all the time. And that Inter result aside, when they lost 5-0, but Barrenechea was suspended for that game, I actually think they were a lot more solid. And Udinese never really looked like scoring. And lest we forget, Udinese lucky to be where they were in the first place, because they scored that 104th minute penalty from Samardzic the previous weekend, which was the latest goal in Serie A history, to get a draw against Empoli.
Do you want to come back, Mina?
Listen, for me, the one thing I could say about Frosinone is that, like, look, Di Francesco, for some reason, he is so beloved by a lot of coaches. So that means that, everyone talks about him on a tactical level. I will never forget what he managed to do to Barcelona when he was in charge of Roma. I think that was probably one of the greatest nights I've ever watched in European football. But ever since the end of December, it's been tragic for Frosinone. I'm looking at it like, if you look at their stats, they managed 1 win, which was against Cagliari in January. And the rest is all losses. So between the 23rd of December until the 16th of March, it was all losses except 2 draws and 1 win. And it's been that run that they had. So if you fixed it or didn't fix it, like, you can't go that many weeks being so abjectly poor. And I think
Verona
it's very strange.
Lecce did it. I mean, it happens.
You're
it
right.
comes down to your overall points tally at the end of the season.
Absolutely, you're right about that. And I think just the first half of the season, though, I think when you saw how good they were, to then have that massive drop towards after December was disconcerting, because it looks like people figured out exactly what they needed to do against them, and then he didn't know how to change up. So obviously he did find a way of doing that towards the end, and he will always be regarded as a good coach. So I'm not taking anything away, but I do think that run in the second half of the season has been so poor, and that is what condemned them. A little bit like what happened to Juventus, a lot of others who just collapsed in the second half of the season, and happened to them too. And defensively, I think it's the 3 worst defenses have gone down, which shows you that defense counts more than attack. But people will tell you otherwise because De Zerbi still gets jobs. So.
I think that's. I do think that's reductive.
I have this slight feeling that actually a lot of this does still come down to your attackers, because in the end we are talking about very fine margins, right? We're talking about a situation where it could have gone for any of these three clubs on the final day, and right up until the last minute of the season, Frosinone was staying up. And actually, maybe there is something in the fact that Matthias Sule, who's been brilliant overall, if you take his season as a young player and look at what he did, but maybe there is something to the fact that he didn't score. I think he scored one goal after the 3rd of February. So actually his goals this season were very front loaded. Meanwhile, Nyang shows up and scores some goals at really opportune times for Empoli. That decides the season, actually. Being able to put the ball in the net at the right moments, the right games decides the season. So while I take your point generally about defensive tightness, I do think the lower down the division you go, the less often you see good goal scorers, inevitably. Sure. And therefore having the one player who will get that goal for you at the critical moment becomes even more important.
Well, I can also counter that Walid Khedira started to show up only in the second half of the season, right?
True.
So it was Sule, and when he's dropped off, it's when Walid Khedira started to come in. So I'm not saying that you have a bunch of, you know what your team is, right? You know that what your problem with your team right now is that you can't rely on efficiency. You can't rely on striking efficiency. So shore up your defense. And if you don't know how to do that, then I think that's the first thing that you learn to do. When did
we just
when
said
did
it? 4 clean sheets in 5, 5 clean sheets in 7.
But I already told you that that's not true. So I don't know why we're repeating it, because it's not.
What do you mean it's not true? Just look at the statistics. I commentated on the match. I can get my notes out. I mean, unless I'm
looking at that now in 5 clean sheets in the last 4. Hold on. Okay, so you're saying. Okay. I mean,
if you ignore the actual Udinese game, because you would have been saying that on commentary before that game, right? So
of course,
before
when you said 8, I was saying, are you
games,
counting the Udinese game, which obviously isn't a clean sheet? It's
yeah,
the one that got them relegated.
They conceded 5 against Inter. I'm trying to double check both of you now, because you're disagreeing on this.
Okay, no, you're right.
I'm just looking.
I won't be spouting fake news on the airwaves.
Yeah, because I was counting in my head Udinese, so I was like, what are you talking about? But,
okay, right.
So in my head, I was like, no, that's not what it is. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't think that's something that he's fixed. I think that he was lucky to face opponents that weren't pushing everything. So I'm never going to say to me, like, it's going to be very hard for me to be like, yeah, Di Francesco has managed to figure it out defensively. This guy is never going to, like, it's going to take a while until he proves
damned
that
if
he knows.
And damned if he doesn't then. I mean, what I mean, that's concrete evidence that his teams are defending. What more do you want from him?
No, it's not. Concrete defenses is not the last 5 games of the season. That's not how you count that, because that's impossible to say that, because you're playing against, like you said, Empoli won against Roma. Would that have happened at the start of the season when it was all competitive? Unlikely, right? Like, look at the betting numbers of what had come in at the point for American bets. Empoli was at plus 100, and for Roma to win it was plus 255. That would have never happened.
It is Ryan here, and I have a question for you. What do you do when you win? Like, are you a fist pumper, a woohooer, a hand clapper, a high fiver? I kind of like the high five, but if you want to hone in on those winning moves, check out Chumba Casino. At ChumbaCasino.com, choose from hundreds of social casino style games for your chance to redeem serious cash prizes. There are new game releases weekly, plus free daily bonuses. So don't wait. Start having the most fun ever at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather, now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply.
We've never seen Milan Salernitana. It's much less likely for Salernitana to all of a sudden start scoring goals when they're opponents. We can also say about Salernitana being now, a team. They came in first and were really shocking. They drew 3-3 against Milan. They won against Juventus. Did they win against Juventus? It was a draw.
They drew.
But we're not going to look at Salernitana and be like, wow, they really changed it around once they got relegated, right? No, I'm saying that no. Patrick, you made a point. I'm coming back to defend my point, so we're not going to.
You're bringing in Salernitana to make the point
because Salernitana also changed it around, but we can't say that they did. That's my point: is that you can't base a season or the fact that Di Francesco has changed something based on the last 5 matches, because I don't think that is the true proof of the fact that he's learned his lessons. And I can point to Salernitana as being a team that also changed it. But again, I wouldn't credit them for having changed it. Does that make sense?
I just think, as
think
Nikki
there's no doubt
said, these are
they've
really
changed something.
small,
I think the
fine
argument is
margins.
about whether or not that's the real reason. And I do think we can say some of the. I'm going to be the fence sitter as usual and say I take some of Mina's point, because if you look at the games they've played, Torino, not exactly an attacking force. Salernitana, not an attacking force. Empoli, we've just been discussing their problems in front of goal. Then they do get walloped 5-0 by Inter. Then it's Monza. So there are a bunch of games in there that aren't that big. Having said that, they did play Bologna at the time when Bologna were very much fighting for a top 4 spot at the beginning of April, and that was 0-0 as well. So I'm gonna be the fence sitter in this one and say
Inter beat Fiorentina 4-0.
They
They beat Milan 5-1. They beat Roma 4-2. They beat Napoli 3-0. So I think bringing in Inter as the example of them conceding 5 is a bit harsh as well, to be honest.
I get where you're coming from. Although Inter did also manage to not beat Sassuolo, of course, because football's weird sometimes. Let's not just have this argument for the entire show. Let's keep it moving. Guys,
let's talk about Fabio Cannavaro, who's been amazing.
Cannavaro, is he? So we've just agreed that De Rossi, we are absolutely certain, is or isn't the answer. Is Cannavaro the answer?
I am certain De Rossi is the answer. We didn't talk about that. I do think that he's going to be. I think I don't know if he's the answer, but I definitely think he deserves a shot. So.
We've just got a floating thumbs up on producer Simon's screen.
Thumbs down. I think thumbs down, isn't it?
Thumbs down. Sorry. I meant thumbs down. Oh God, poor Simon. Cannavaro, though, impressive, certainly from a results perspective, right? We're impressed with Cannavaro from a results perspective. Mina.
Oh God, no. I honestly don't know. Again, how can we count that? How? Yeah. I don't know how we can base it on the fact that he's been in charge of 5 games. And again, it's the end of the season and no one cares. So I don't know how to judge whether or not he's managed to revive something. Good on him to have rescued them. They started to show a different mentality at least. So I hope that leads them forward. I always want Fabio Cannavaro to succeed because it's Fabio Cannavaro, right? But I find it really hard to draw any conclusions from his tenure.
Patrick, you going with that, or are you disagreeing?
Well, again, I would argue, what can he be judged against if not results? If he comes in and he's given 5 matches to try and keep them in the division and he's fulfilled his objective, which I think ultimately is what he did. And the one game he lost was that game which was played in installments against Roma when Cristante scored in the last minute. So, look, he was fortunate in that Udinese got that ridiculously late penalty, and but for that penalty, then Empoli win that game. Empoli start the match outside the drop zone, and maybe it's even outside of Udinese's hands. But you make your own luck as well. They rode their luck against Frosinone because his goalkeeper produced an excellent performance. They needed the crossbar to keep out that free kick. But he'd been talking in the build-up to the game about Keenan Davis, about whether to start him or bring him off the bench because he felt they could breathe new life into their strike force. And he introduced him for the second half, and he was ultimately the match winner. So I think it does come down to brave decisions, and I was quite impressed with Cannavaro. He also said in his post-match press conference, bristling a little bit, he said, "I've got nothing to prove. It's been a decade of me coaching all over the world. I don't have to," he feels a little bit slighted by the fact that in Italy he doesn't have much of a reputation as a coach. So he's not bothered about the fact that he's now kept Udinese up and is getting plaudits. He's quite confident in his own ability. And I thought it was a nice gesture for him embracing Di Francesco. His brother Paolo played under him at Sassuolo. He also said that he was teammates with Di Francesco, Fabio that is. I was trying to work out where that could be, and I couldn't. I was scratching my head about that. So if anyone knows that, then answers on a postcard. But I was impressed with Cannavaro. They started in an awkward position, Udinese, because it was a very weird shout out to Matteo Bonetti, actually. He put out a very good tweet which basically said that all 3 of the teams going into the final day had their fate in their own hands, which is almost unheard of if you think about it, because Frosinone just needed to avoid defeat. They were definitely safe. Udinese needed to win and they were definitely safe. And Empoli needed to win and they were definitely safe. And Udinese were the middle one of those 3 teams. And for large swathes of the match, until Nyong scores late on, a draw would have been enough. So for them to actually go out and consciously pursue the victory and then get it, I thought was excellent game management from Cannavaro.
Well put. And what we'd like to do, we've been saying for this episode, is try to have at least a word on every team. So we're going to try now to move on from those games that were the really impactful ones at the bottom of the table to go through the rest of the games this weekend, trying to have at least a quick comment on everyone. Do you know, I actually thought before we started maybe we do these in table order, but maybe I think it's easiest if we just go through them in the order that they are on the run sheet of the weekend. So let's spin our way all the way back to Thursday. Of course, we were still busy giddy from Atlanta's win at that point, and we will get to Atlanta. But let's start with Thursday. We had Fiorentina 3, Cagliari 2. Fiorentina, of course, have now locked down 8th place in the table. They are guaranteed into Europe, and they have a chance to upgrade themselves from the Europa Conference League to the Europa League if they can win the Europa Conference League, which, as everyone knows, they have reached the final of for the second season running, and they are playing that on Wednesday night. Fiorentina, I really feel like we've gone back and forth on them this season about whether or not this constitutes a positive season for them. And speaking only for myself, I think I have now reached the point where, for me, I have to call this positive season, because I think a team with still plenty of gaps in its squad has managed to juggle going all the way to the Europa League Conference League final with additional commitments, like indeed playing even in the Supercoppa in the middle of the season, with the distractions are a horrible way to put it. I'm sorry for not phrasing that better, with an awful thing happening in the middle of the season, which is the death of a director, Joe Brown, who was extremely involved in the running of the club and was someone who meant a lot to a lot of people. I think for me, for that team to have finished once again in Europe, guaranteed, with an option, a possibility of going up to the Europa League, I'm calling that another positive season to Vincenzo Italiano. Patrick, are you with me on this?
I am, and I think, lest we forget, they made the Coppa Italia semi-finals as well. And whilst the overall aggregate scoreline looked very heavy, lest we forget, they went down to 10 men in that game. Milenkovic was sent off for a dog-so, denying a goal-scoring opportunity on Scamacca. And then Martinez Cuarta came off the bench when they were down to 10 men, scored the goal. They were actually ahead. It was 1-1 on the night, 2-1 on aggregate, and Atalanta scored a flurry of goals late on, Lukman and Pasalic. So they could have feasibly made the Coppa Italia final as well, having made it last season. I think Italiano's done a very good job, because ultimately, to me, football comes down to trophies. And Fiorentina's a great club. It's a one-club city. It's a big city. You know, and I think if you're born somewhere like Florence, just like if you're born in Rome, then you come from one of the most beautiful cities on earth. So naturally, you want your football team to reflect that in terms of pride, and you want them to be successful. And I think they have been successful under Italiano. Conference League final last season, Coppa Italia final last season, Coppa Italia final semi-final this season, Coppa Italia semi-final in his first year as well, when they lost to Juventus over 2 legs. And they're in the Conference League final again. I think it will come down to whether or not he's able to win on Wednesday night. I think it goes from being an outstanding spell if they win the Conference League to being an above average one if they were to lose it. He's definitely going to leave the club. But I think by that token, if you are going to reach cup finals, then your league position is a fairly moot point, to be honest. I mean, if you were to ask Fiorentina fans, would you rather win the Conference League and finish 8th or whatever it is they're going to be, or would you rather not win a trophy, go out as also runs and finish 4th? I'm pretty sure they choose the former option, to be honest. And we saw with Roma winning the Conference League just what it means to win a trophy and what it means to win a European trophy. So I'm a fan of Italiano, and I like the way that he has targeted the cup competitions, because he's aware of where Fiorentina sit in the domestic food chain, which is behind most of their rivals.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, really. Mina, Vincenzo Italiano, where do you think he'll be next season? Where would you like him to be next season?
Oh, I don't know. He is, he is truly one of the better Italian tacticians that we've seen. And, I really did want to see him in Napoli, but that looks like it's Antonio Conte, which is, I think it's a much better fit. I think Conte is exactly the coach that Napoli should be going for. So when it comes to Italiano, I don't know what is considered a step up on Fiorentina that is realistic for him at the moment. And I don't know, because Lazio and Roma have their coaches for next season. So do the top four, right? Or at least what, according to the rumors. So I'm not sure what the step up is from Fiorentina. And I think that what he's done, it's difficult, right? Because he keeps growing in our in our view. Italiano has become one of the best coaches, and we always talk about it. So that means our expectations of him are also continuing to grow. Like at some points, I feel like people are demanding that he reaches top 5 because he's done so many good things. But it's just unrealistic when you look at the team, when you look at the depth, when you look at the money, and honestly, when you look at the state of the strikers, it is hideous. The fact that he managed to get them to 2 European Cup finals is beyond anything that I would have imagined for them. I honestly don't know what his next step is. I'm interested to see, but I really do feel like if anyone should be going to the Premier League, I'd like to see Italiano there because I think he'd be magnificent to watch.
He's been linked with Bologna very heavily. I don't know if that's a step up. They'd be playing Champions League football. I think it's a sideways move. Well, it's a step up for a season, isn't it? But in the long term, is it a step up? Probably not. I think they're pretty even clubs, to be honest, between Bologna and Fiorentina. I think both fan bases would probably get annoyed at me saying that because Bologna have the history with all the league titles and Fiorentina have relative recent success compared with Bologna. But yeah, I guess it depends whether he thinks I'd love to be in the Champions League and look at what Thiago Motta's done. I want to be able to do something similar. So, he's going to be out of work unless he wants to take a year off. But there we go.
I think I maybe you disagree on this, but I think what you just said there is interesting, Patrick, because unlike some managers who I think can take that sabbatical comfortably, I think Italiano's name still hasn't acquired that international stature where if he takes sabbatical, he's going to retain his current cachet. So I actually think he kind of needs to keep moving on upwards at the moment. And whether or not Bologna is that upwards, we can agree or disagree on. But I do think he probably, of course, everyone is a real person. If he wants it for his personal life, he should take it for his personal life. But I do think, I think he kind of needs to strike while the iron's hot in terms of his current progress. Cagliari, having said we're going to talk about every team, I'm not sure what else I have to add on them. We had a lot of conversation about Ranieri and what a wonderful story it's been. We now know that he's not planning to stay on for another season there. He's going to ride off into the sunset, having been a hero, which is fantastic for him. I think we talked about the fact that this squad, to me, has lots of limitations. I still think this squad has lots of limitations. That's why it's such an amazing season for them to stay up. But right now, I would have probably put them close to my list of teams I'll be worried about next season unless they do something unexpected this summer. Any disagreement on that?
No, full agreement.
Yes, I'm just thinking about their squad and how I would compare it. I still think Verona should have gone down. How is it that Verona's there? And I look at that squad and I just think if I'm talking about the best squads, I wouldn't put Sassuolo or Frosinone down there. So I don't know. There are a few players that I do like at Cagliari, but yeah, I agree with you. I think it's been an impressive job.
Genoa 2, Bologna 0 was the next game on Friday. Very much an end of season. We've done our job. Bologna performance, I would say, not a result to take too seriously in terms of just as a result. Bologna are. I
hate them for that, though. I hate them for that. I hate that they didn't win
help Roma's cause, did it?
Yeah, it really annoyed me that they just didn't show up for this. I was like, oh, screw you. You know what I mean? There's this part of me that was like, oh, come on, Atalanta's just won. If there's any team that should be on holiday right now, it could be Atalanta, who wanted to take this weekend off. And they come in with a 3-0 performance that shows you what Gasperini does, right? And Bologna, they're like, yeah, we went on the bus. We've secured top Champions League. Screw this. Calafiori's snogging his girlfriend. They're all just riding into the sunset. I'm like, guys, you could really help Serie A right now. So that really bothered me, but whatever,
They did. Definitely that loss, as you say, has helped in combination with Atlanta's win, has dashed the dream of 6 Champions League clubs for Italy. Nice for Genoa to end the season on a high note. They've ended up, in the end, avoiding relegation pretty comfortably. And I think, for me, the story, we'll talk about Bologna a bit more in a second, but just let's quickly do Genoa. The story of their season, if I was going to highlight any one thing from their season that perhaps we haven't talked about enough, it's probably Albert Goodmanson, isn't it? He's had a fantastic season, 14 goals he finishes with. He had another assist at the weekend. I think he's a player who's going to be getting a lot of attention, 26 years old, Icelandic centre-forward who's really been one of the standouts at, if we want to use the word that probably is misapplied all the time in Italy, but Provinciale, one of the teams that isn't one of the obvious competitive clubs at the very top of the division. I think he's one of the real standouts this season. And talking about earlier how goal scorers decide games has certainly decided lots for them. Was there anything else you guys wanted to add on Genoa and their performance this season? It's been impressive they haven't been anywhere near relegation, because I think that was definitely their main target to avoid at the start of the season.
Yeah,
I think it's brilliant. Like I think Genoa needs a lot of deserve a lot of praise for what they've managed this season to finish within 4 points of last year's winners. I mean, it shows you a lot about what Napoli have collapsed, yeah. But it's also really impressive to finish where they did, and you would never have expected it of a newly promoted team. And more importantly, I think what's been so great about Genoa is that they've never had an off game. Every game they've gone into, they've always showed the right mentality. And I think that's what's really striking. Even in these last 5 matches of the season, even when everyone looks like they're on holiday, even when they have absolutely nothing to play for, they show up in every match and always perform to their level. And I think that's what's been the most impressive. I think Gilardino has been one of the most underrated coaches this season. I think he's done such an impressive job. They sell Dragusin, and yet they're still defensively good at the back. That they have a good team, and I Friendup has been probably one of the more outstanding midfielders that they've got right now. But I just think this is, it's a team that is very well built. They've got a good number of players. But this is what I like, a team that performs to expectations or just even a bit above. So considering the tools that they've got, considering the players they have, they've done a tremendous job. And I think that they deserve a lot of praise.
That's a great point about Dragusin leaving in the middle of the season. He was someone who we would have really talked about as one of the most impressive performers earlier in the season. So that's a great point, that they didn't miss a beat. And you're right, Gilardino, who I really would not have guessed was going to mature into a great manager. I think when you see footballers, sometimes you look at them and go, that's someone who you expect to be a manager one day. I don't know if I would have put that on Gilardino. I sometimes felt as a player he was someone who seemed to disappear into himself and be quite inward looking, and I didn't necessarily see that being someone who'd become a manager, but he's been
like Simone Inzaghi.
Fantastic. Sorry?
I wonder sometimes if players are not such great managers, like players who weren't such great players, if they can make great managers. And there was this whole debate about it over the weekend, and you look at like Mourinho and Gilardino's one like exactly that. You would never think so, but you look at Xabi Alonso and think he's going to be the best ever manager. And how much does that actually determine how good you're going to be as a manager? Your playing career.
Gilardino was the Champions League and World Cup winner.
Yeah, I think he was a great player. I do not agree, but I always felt like he was one of those players who had something that he never reached that he should have done. He felt like he was on the verge of being a really brilliant player, and instead he was a good player on some good teams. I'm not saying he wasn't, but I always felt like there was something in his mentals.
Yes,
people like
absolutely.
Say now the mentals weren't quite as strong as they could have been.
That's why I compare him to Simone Inzaghi, because Inzaghi was I think Inzaghi was also someone who won the Scudetto, and obviously he scored how many goals in a Champions League? But it is that I would never have expected him to. I agree with you. I just would never have seen that and thought that he's going to be such a good manager. But he is my ideal choice for Bologna. I wish it happened, but he's staying with Genoa.
I'm going to have to bring up the goal scoring of Gilardino.
19 goals in 50. Sorry.
No, just the all-time goal scorers in Serie A. I'm just seeing where he is. Gilardino 10th, 188 goals. Same number as Alessandro Del Piero, same number as Beppe Signori, 5 more than Gabriel Batistuta, more than Quagliarella. I mean, yeah.
Do you see him though and think of him? Do you see him and think of that as his past, or do you see him as sort of thing? Like Del Piero is like this ever important guy in everyone's head. Would you rate Gilardino in that same way, considering his stats?
Well, no, because they're very different type of player. And I think actually it speaks to Del Piero's longevity and his goal record, because he wasn't an out-and-out striker, whereas Gilardino was much more that profile. What I think it shows is that Gilardino, who moved around quite a lot, was a very reliable source of goals between sort of 15 and 20 almost every season. And this was an era when it's very difficult to get to 20 goals in Serie A. It's been made a lot easier in recent years. So I think to get 188 goals in Serie A is astonishing. He's in the top 10. So, that's his legacy. But again, you can always argue numbers don't necessarily tell the whole story. I mean, he played a lot of matches as well. But then you could also say, well, he played a lot of matches because people rated him and he kept himself injury-free. And I think he wouldn't have played for the clubs he did. He wouldn't have won what he did had he not been a good player. But I take the point. You look at goal scorers as he was, and you don't necessarily think they're going to be the sharpest tactical minds or the most curious coaches, for sure.
Yeah.
My point does go a bit beyond that. I don't want to get too caught in this because we have got a lot to get to, but I just want to sort of come this from where I'm coming from, which is that I think part of how my framing of Gilardino has always been is, yes, he scored all these goals, but when he was at his biggest club, when he was at Milan, that was his most disappointing period. When he went to the place where the pressure was highest, he seemed to disappear. But he did have a 12-goal season, a 7-goal season. He had the 2 long runs in the Champions League where I think his total Champions League goal scoring record at Milan I have in front of me, and it's 4 goals in 28 games. That's not a good scoring record for someone whose main job is to score goals. So I think that was the reason that I have perhaps always viewed him as someone who, certainly not knocking his body of work in his career, but never seemed to be someone in my mind who dealt with those very highest pressure situations as well as I would want him to as a player. And so seeing him as a manager was not necessarily a step that I expected. But again, I'm saying this in the context of I was wrong because I think he's doing a great job. Bologna, let's talk about Bologna because we do need to. Thiago Motta, we basically know now, is gone. He's going to Juventus. We've already had the question that follows that inevitably being asked to several of the team's most important players. Joshua Zirkzee, I saw, was interviewed just the other day and said, look, basically my focus right now is I want to go on holiday with my family and take a break and enjoy this moment, which he's entitled to. But hard not to wonder where this team goes now that there is no more Thiago Motta. And Patrick, do you think, are you optimistic or pessimistic about where this goes next?
I think it will depend on how they frame their expectations. Because I think I would take the example of Napoli. You had a very charismatic head coach who overachieved, who led you to the Scudetto after 33 years away. Bologna have now qualified for the Champions League after more than 6 decades almost. So I think it depends. If you see your head coach go, which he's already announced he'll be leaving, if you then lose a player or two, which Napoli did with Kim, lest we forget, then I think you need to reframe your expectations. The problem is you won't, because how are you going to douse supporters' enthusiasm? It's just impossible to do. You expect to get continually better. You hope the club will show ambition. So it will all come down to the appointment, whether they hire the right coach, whether they're then able to reinvest, and whether the ownership is willing to reinvest any money they make on any big player sales. But I think you need to consider where you are in the grand scheme of Italian football and say this season was an exceptional one. And by that, I mean extraordinary as in out of the ordinary, quite literally. So you therefore need to go back to what your uniform standard would look like and say, okay, we want to finish in the top 10. If we can qualify for Europe again, great. But we're going to enjoy our Champions League run, and we're going to try and continue to identify, bring in young talent and develop players and hopefully sell them on at a profit. I don't think Bologna should have delusions of grandeur, which I do think is something that afflicted Napoli supporters this season.
Mina, let's keep moving and get on to Juventus next. They beat Monza 2-0 this weekend. They end strongly under Montero with the 3-3 draw against Bologna and now this 2-0 win. But of course, Montero is just there for a minute. It's about to be the Thiago Motta show in Turin. Overall verdict on this season and finishing, well, not certain to finish in third. Atalanta, if they do beat Fiorentina in that postponed game, will move above them, but Juventus will be either third or fourth. We know they also won the Coppa Italia before Max Allegri took his shirt off and then took his leave, or was encouraged to take his leave, perhaps.
I was listening back to our pod from last week and I started laughing so much because I missed the part where Patrick started singing "You Can Leave Your Hat On." What was that song? It really made me laugh. It would have been really nice if we played some striptease song to him leaving. It's very difficult to really honestly accurately judge Juventus' season because obviously for the first half of it, they were absolutely brilliant. It's also fair to say that as a Juventus fan, I can honestly say that this is a team that I followed all my life. And if I was to judge it by previous teams, this is the worst team I've ever seen don the black and white shirt. So it's a very mediocre group of players. So what they managed in the first half for me was well above all my expectations. What they managed in the second half is well below any of my expectations. So it's a real jarring sort of season in which I've seen the very best and I've seen the very worst. I don't know what to think going forward. I thought that maybe we had started to find our feet from a management point of view, but I do wonder how much the ideas seem to be frazzled. And I have some concerns. I think Monchi has proved that if you're a very good sporting director in one particular club, which is about developing talent and about scouting great potential, you can be a success in that. But then when you have to scout actual players to win the very big matches and to be leaders, it's an entirely different ball game, right? Which is why at the time it was so great to have Marotta and Paratici, because I think they set the tone for that. And what Inter's doing right now is doing that too. I'd like to hope Juventus's future looks good. Let's see what Thiago Motta can do. We've already heard rumours about him not liking Federico Chiesa and not wanting to centre his project around it. And there's been all these question marks. Yeah, I think this is the one guy that Patrick and I quite agree on. We do have a lot of doubts when it comes to Chiesa. I think we both agree. I mean, I'm speaking for you, but I think we both agree that he has raw talent. It's about the focus and about the ability to develop certain aspects of his game that I haven't seen him develop, which worries me. So let's see what Thiago Motta will think and do. But he will need to be a very, very mentally strong coach to cope with everything that's going on at Juventus. So I don't have high hopes of them doing much. I think it's another transitional year, but let's just see what happens in Champions League football, because this will be where Motta really needs to show that he has what it takes to make it in Europe, because Serie A does not suffice for Juventus.
Monza finished the season with, I think, 3 points from their last 9 games. It was a pretty spectacular end to the season in terms of going off the boil. I have realised that we're running really long on this idea I had of let's try and talk about every team. So unless there's anything you particularly want to shout out about them, Patrick, I'll just say the most interesting story, I think, at the start of the summer for them is the situation with their goalkeeper, Didi Gregorio, who's had a really good season. A lot of people very disappointed that he's not going to be part of the Italy squad. But it sounds like he might be off to their opponents this weekend, Juventus, very shortly as well. Is there anything else you wanted to shout out on them quickly? Or is
just that their coach is leaving,
fine?
Raffaele Palladino, who did an excellent job, who came in, got them their first ever win last season against Juventus, his former club, and he's gone full circle. He made no attempt to hide the fact that he's going to be leaving the club. He said, I'll tell you my decision at the start of June, but he's heavily expected to leave the club. And he's one of the names being linked with Bologna. So I think he's done a very good job. Promoted from the Primavera up to the first team and basically got them 50 points in each of their 2 seasons, there or thereabouts.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point, actually, and worth saying before, as I was breezing over them. They were able to lose all those games at the end of the season because they'd achieved again, like Genoa, they'd achieved what they had set out to achieve, which was avoiding relegation. They were never at risk of it, really, because of how strongly they started the season. So an excellent job by Palladino. Next game up is Milan 3, Salernitana 3. A fun game in a season which did not have a lot of those for Salernitana. Mina, I know you wanted to talk about Pioli, so I'm going to throw to you again.
I just wanted to say Galliani offered the job to Allegri, but anyway, the Monza job, so that would be hilarious. No, it was just something that obviously I'm thrilled for Pioli that he got the exit that he deserves. It was going to be a rant about what Sacchi said when it came to Pioli and the fact that he had hoped for somebody better to be linked to the club than Fonseca. And and then he mentioned that, you know, he would have preferred to see someone else. And I guess my rant is that I don't know why Fonseca is regarded as being so tragically awful. Not that I would understand that you would want a better coach, but then why did you get rid of Pioli? I think what I took issue with is that Sacchi rates De Zerbi as being this really brilliant coach, and then you look at over the course of what they've managed, and I'm like, the guy finished last in a Champions League group that had Sheriff. Like, as in, he lost to Sheriff, for goodness sakes. Like, and like, he got smashed in the Europa League. I don't see how Fonseca is that much worse than him. If anything, I think that he's done a terrific job, actually, for Shakhtar and for Roma in Europe. So I don't look at him and think, you know, he reached the semi-finals of the Europa League. And I think this is a guy that everyone's watching at Lille, who's got 7 players of under 25 that start the team. He's won 21 of 31 games. So it's magnificent how he's taken this team that's from 13th position, I think, to 5th and then 4th now. So I just want to say, like, Fonseca might not be everyone's dream, but if you ask me between him and De Zerbi, hands down, it's Fonseca.
There's not just Pioli saying goodbye to Milan, of course. This was the last game for Olivier Giroud, Simon Kjaer. We're seeing a few big names say farewell. I, for one, of course, I'm going to miss Giroud. Everyone knows how enthusiastic I am about him. And bon voyage to Olivier, wherever he's moving on to next. I do think the situation for Milan is still a bit complicated around that, because Luka Jovic and Okafor had their moments this season, but neither of them really said, hey, I'm your number 9 who's going to do this confidently. So that is a big question for them next season, even though there were other positives this season, including, of course, Christian Pulisic having a fantastic season. Ruben Loftus-Cheek, I think, integrating well. There are certainly still questions, and I know, Patrick, you've been not always on board the Rafael Leao train. It's been a journey of ups and downs.
I thought he took his goal brilliantly against Salernitana. I thought it was a fabulous finish when he tapped it into an empty net after the goalkeeper dropped it at his feet. Yeah, no, I what I did enjoy was him running to Pioli and hugging him. And I think we were made aware of the fact that and Leao also had a tribute to Giroud as well, and he made the point that actually Pioli was there a lot longer than Giroud, but we've seen that these are two players who have almost signposted certain stages of Leao's development. In that, he said he was however old he was when Pioli first took charge. I mean, he's 1999, isn't he? So he's 25 now. So Pioli's been there nearly 5 years. So I guess he's about 20 when Pioli first came in charge. And he said, you allowed me to become an elite player, which I then saw people churlishly saying, you're not an elite player. An elite player is consistent. And leaving aside whether Leao is consistent or not, I do think that's Pioli's great legacy. Aside from the Scudetto win, it's allowing players like Theo Hernandez and Rafael Leao to develop into world-class players.
Yeah.
Salernitana have been relegated for a while. Not a happy season for them. Went through 4 managers over the course of the season. It feels like forever ago that Pippo Inzaghi was there. He actually lasted till game number 24. But also Paulo Sousa, who started the season before him, Fabio Liverani, Colantuono finished it, and said he was very proud to have ended showing some dignity there at the end. But look, I think, again, too early to say what next season looks like for them. They're going to go down. They're going to have a chance to reset. Colantuono was saying he believes they have a hard core and they can bounce back up quickly. We shall see.
No chance.
Let's move on to Napoli.
Well, the club's
against
up for sale
Lecce.
as well, so I don't think it's going to happen.
Sorry?
To be honest. The club is up for sale, Salernitana. Iervolino's trying to shift it, so I don't think it's. I don't see them coming back up to Serie A anytime soon. Call me a pessimist.
No.
I agree.
Well said. Napoli against Lecce, 0-0. The champions, the reigning champions from last season, finished 10th, which means that even if Fiorentina do win the Europa Conference League and add a 9th European spot to the Italian roster, there will be no European football for Napoli last season, which we were talking about before the show might just be a blessing, Patrick, because Antonio Conte looks likely to take over the Napoli job. And I think you and I were in agreement that Antonio Conte would have less than zero interest in Europa Conference League football.
2012, won the league with Juventus, playing 1 game a week. 2017, won the league with Chelsea, playing 1 game a week. 2025, won the Scudetto with Napoli, playing 1 game. No, I think I would be amazed, for all I think Conte is a brilliant tactician. Napoli are in such disarray and they're going to have such a huge clear out of players. I'd be amazed if he did much more beyond qualifying them for the Champions League. But I do think it's the lesser of two evils. It does end Napoli's run of 15 consecutive years of qualifying for Europe, but it also means that that they will be able to focus on, well, they're going to have an extra match actually, because the top 8 teams are seeded for the Coppa Italia, so they won't even get a bye in that match. I was seeing earlier on that they actually have to come in the second round of the Coppa Italia, so they'll be playing a week before the start of the Serie A season against some preposterous sides. I can't even remember who they are. No disrespect to those two teams. So yeah, it's the biggest fall from grace I think you could see, and good riddance to what's been a terrible season. The fans had banners saying them, "We wish you a summer like our season was spent in a sea of excrement," which was nice. And yeah, now the captain wants to jump ship, so la nave affonda, the ship is sinking.
I mean, his agent came out and said that basically he was pushed. So I don't know what to believe when it comes to the captain. I wonder.
The player, don't believe the owner.
Yeah, I agree with you. So I agree with you. So I do think he's been sort of pushed out. But I am I am absolutely dying to see the cocktail of De Laurentiis and Antonio Conte. I mean, if there's anything that makes me like desperate to watch Serie A next season, it is absolutely Napoli.
Very snap judgment and very quick judgment. Could you see Conte coming in and just winning the league right away?
Imagine that.
Who are they going to replace? Well, it depends on who they. Well, I mean, they're linked to Lukaku, right? Like Lukaku's the toy that Conte takes everywhere he goes. Yeah, which is funny.
His comfort blanket.
Yes, his comfort blanket. I mean, you're losing Osimhen, right? It's a big deal. So, I honestly don't know, and I would like to see. I feel like Kvaratskhelia is not his player, so I'm desperate to watch how he's going to do with Kvaratskhelia. But if there's any team in the world that I think that Conte should really needs to go to and focus his energy on, it is Napoli, right? Because it's their mentality that sucks the most. So I really think that it's a good match, and they don't really care right now about winning the Champions League. So I don't know.
Just the thing is, even now, I just instinctively believe in Antonio Conte. I don't always like Antonio Conte's methods. I don't always find them exciting. But listen, if you can make Graziano Pelle and Eder look like a partnership up front that could just have been good enough to win a Euros, but they weren't, but made you feel for a minute like they could be good enough to win a Euros with, then I think you can probably do anything.
How long can you believe in Antonio Conte? That's the question, right? How long can you believe in Antonio Conte, and how much do you believe in him in Europe? Because when it comes to, I agree with you.
He's not in Europe. Easy.
Exactly. So as soon as you think one season Napoli, you think, yeah, definitely he's going to be amazing. But then you start thinking 2-3 seasons, and then you start being like, oh, I don't know. And also what's going to happen, like that is where I have question marks. For one season though, for this first one at least, you're confident on what he's going to achieve.
Lecce, my personal highlight with Lecce goes all the way back to December, when Vladimiro Falcone, who remains one of my favourite name players in the whole division because he just always sounds like he's Bond villain, the goalkeeper for Lecce goes up and wins a penalty in the 95th minute of their draw with Bologna in December. That's going to be my abiding memory, I think, of Lecce's season. But again, another team that we knew was very likely to be in that relegation fight. They managed to not be in it in the last day of the season. I think that's pretty much mission accomplished. The next game, Atalanta-Torino. Atalanta ruined it for Italy by just going ahead and thumping Torino, claiming 4th place and giving themselves a chance at 3rd place, making sure that Roma definitely will not be going to the Champions League next season. Look, I don't know how much more there is to add at this point about how absolutely extraordinary this team has been. I just want to reiterate again, if you're not getting it, and you should be getting it after how they absolutely handled Bayer Leverkusen, this juggernaut of a team, then the fact that they did that, having beaten Marseille the round before and Liverpool the round before, all 3-0 in at least one of the legs, the fact that they're doing this while playing just constantly, twice a week, forever. Look at their calendar if you're having any doubts at all about how extraordinary this is. They have not had a break in forever. And as Mina said, despite not having had a break in forever, still showed up this weekend and thumped Torino, didn't take even one step backwards in that approach. Extraordinary stuff from Gianpiero Gasperini. I can't wait to see this team go in the Champions League again next season. I've seen some headlines over the weekend about how Gasperini says, I don't want to sell any players this summer. I actually don't believe them. I don't think Gasperini is throwing his weight around. I think he has a great relationship with the owners, and they will collaborate and work out a way forward that works for everyone.
And above all, he's staying,
Anything
which is
else
the
you
big
guys
news.
want to add on the Atalanta?
Yeah, I think on Thursday, wasn't it, after the Europa League win, that his future was still shrouded in uncertainty. There were the strong Napoli links before the Conte speculation sort of advanced, and Gasperini came out after the 3-0 win over Torino and said, I'm definitely staying. And Ivan Juric, who's one of his acolytes, said that Gasperini is the best coach in Europe.
I just want to say that this is a win for all wives. He didn't choose the mistress. He chose the wife. If you don't know this, he came out after the game and said, the mistress is Napoli and my wife is Atalanta.
It would have been interesting to see him in Naples, but less fun than the Antonio Conte Aurelio De Laurentiis stories. Mina, quick answer. Ivan Juric at Torino, are we still buying that, or are we starting to think that's run its course? Is there news on this?
He's leaving. He's leaving.
We don't.
He's leaving.
He is leaving.
He's
yeah.
leaving.
So
Yes.
I'll read say that. Mina, Ivan Juric at Torino. Is this? How are we going to look back on this chapter? Positive, negative, just somewhere in the middle, because this was another middling season, I guess. Although they could yet be in Europe, depending on Fiorentina's result in the Europe Conference League.
I think it's a positive season. I mean, he's given us Samuel Ricci, who's part of the squad. He's given us, and he's used him wisely in Torino. We haven't seen him go down from his level at Empoli. He's developed further. I think Buongiorno is another great tick for Ivan Juric and his development at Torino. It's a side that doesn't have a lot of talent. You're looking at Vlasic up front, and Zapata, who have tried to score the goals. It's a team that's defended really well, that has used their tools as much as possible. And I like Ivan Juric in the sense he will play an attacking game if he has the right attackers, and he'll play a defensive game if he has defenders. So he's always adapted to all the players that he's got. I think that they've worked really hard. You've never wanted to face Torino this season. You knew that they were going to be really tough to face. And I think it's honestly, I think chapeau to what he's managed to accomplish this season, especially if he gets them into the Conference League. Of course, that is, dependent on whether or not Fiorentina win. But it's got to be second time lucky, right?
Come on, Fiorentina.
We'll see.
Come on, Fiorentina.
I'm really looking forward to that final, but who knows? I keep coming back to the fact that it's in Athens. Lazio won, Sassuolo won. I think we all feel pretty positive about the start of Igor Tudor's time at Lazio. He started positively. We've seen some real signs of improvement. Sassuolo, it's hard to shake the feeling that this was just a real lost season for them. They should be better than this, I think. Of all the teams that are going down, they're the one who I think I expected more of. I think at the same time, they're one that I feel reasonably confident for the future with, because the Squeensy family aren't going anywhere. I think they have a setup that allows them to come back and move forward. But short term, it's the end of the era in which they've been carried by Domenico Berardi, and that's something they're going to have to move on from. I think there could be short-term pain, but I think long-term, I think Sassuolo are still in safe hands. And the last game we haven't got to yet is Verona 2, Inter 2. Let's do Verona first. I think every one of us is hugely impressed with the job this season that Marco Baroni has done. I know in January we were all riffing on what an absolute mess it was, and the fact you had half the team looking at each other and going, who are you? Because it all arrived in January. So the fact again that they got to the end of the season and didn't have to worry about things in the last game of the campaign, could have fun going against Inter and not worrying about the result, play an attacking game, is clearly a huge result. Where does it go next, Patrick? Where's the next step for the Verona story?
I'm concerned that they're going to have another fire sale in the summer, because all the players that they replaced in January, most of them have done pretty well, especially with Tijani Noslin, who they brought in, who reminds me a lot of the impact that Cyril Ngonge had. They seem to scout very well in the Netherlands. They brought in Noslin, scored a lot of goals, scored again against Inter yesterday. I think he's got 5 goals since January, so very impressed with him. So I think the credit goes to, obviously, the players, Marco Baroni, but also Sean Soliano, who was the returning sporting director, who'd done very well there in the past. He's now being linked with jobs elsewhere. But I like Diego Coppola as well, the academy central defender. It was him and Terracciano who really burst onto the scene last season, and Terracciano was sold to Milan in January, and Coppola has been pretty sturdy at the back. I like him as part of their defensive unit. So it remains to be seen. There's always uncertainty where Maurizio Setti, the president, is involved. There's a lot of financial scrutiny surrounding Verona. But nice to see one of the historic Serie A clubs, a title winner, lest we forget, in '85, back still in Serie A.
And then there's Inter. We've got save the best till last. Runaway champions, I think. We've said quite a lot about them, but perhaps still bears saying one more time, just an extraordinary season. 94 points in the end was not enough to put them in that record-setting category, but it's one of the best all-time Serie A seasons. Unfortunately, I haven't got it in front of me, but Opta adjusted all previous seasons to 3 points for a win, and this is still certainly, and I think it was in the top 5 of all-time seasons in Serie A. So it's a hugely impressive campaign, especially when you think that's despite definitely a few dropped games here at the end of the season, which you think, well, they would have won if they'd needed to, rather than taking their foot off the pedal. Of course, if this had been a must-win game, you probably wouldn't have seen Arnautovic starting up front, although he scored 2 goals. So there you go. Saved his best till last as well. Patrick, I'll come back to you again. Anything else you'd like to add on this extraordinary season by Simone Inzaghi and Inter?
No, I just think wonderful, and it basically vindicates all of the decisions they made. You know, they made no bones about the fact that they wanted to target the Scudetto above all as their priority to get to number 20, the second star, do it ahead of Milan. And there's a great interview actually that went out on the documentary about Inter this week. Intergalactic, shout out to that, where Beppe Marotta basically said to Serie A Radio at the start of the season, they said, you went to the Champions League final last season, what if you were to win the Scudetto this season? He said, I'd happily shake on that. If it's alternating between Champions League final 1 year, league title the next, I'd happily take that. So brilliant. In an ideal world, they would have gone to another Champions League final, but I think they'd much rather win their 20th league title in the derby as they did, and by far and away the standout team. And it will be concerning for the other 19 teams in Serie A, because despite all the uncertainty surrounding the ownership and the presidency, in terms of the senior management and the playing staff, they're just unbelievable. And the head coach, who's out of this world as well.
I was at my cousin's wedding this weekend, and I always say my cousin. It's actually my cousin's son, but there's a weird sort of age gap between the two sides of the family. So my cousin is a bit older than me. My cousin's son is a bit younger than me. So they're just both my cousins to me. And the older of the two, then, so the one who's actually my cousin, they're both huge Inter fans. They went to the final last season of the Champions League, and the older cousin for the best part of 2 years has been telling me all the reasons he doesn't like Simone Inzaghi, just constantly don't like him. This weekend, he finally said, you know what, I think he might have been right about Simone Inzaghi. So it took a while, but even the skeptics have come around. Mina, I think we're about to wrap up for the season. So why don't you see us out with your thoughts on Inter, and then you can take us to the end of a season in Serie A Chronicles.
I know, it really is. It's a little bit sad. Honestly, I guess my only thought is that I'm very happy for him. I'm very happy for him considering everything that was written about Simone Inzaghi. So, there's still people who I love that Moratti came out and said that there's various moments that I would have sacked Inzaghi too. So it should be a lesson to everyone to sort of, remain patient. If there is a project, if you like the coach, and this is what I think great managements do. Is like, honestly, you can change your coaches, you can change your players, you can even change your ownership. But if you have a great management team, I really think you'll succeed. And that's the only thing that gives me hope for Bologna as well, right? Because I do like their management. So, long live management. But I do want to thank you all, producers Simon, Nikki, Patrick, for this exhaustive season. We will come back to you to tell you a little bit more about how Fiorentina managed to fare in the Champions League Conference League final. We really hope that, having reached the second one in a row, that they'll actually win this one. It's going to be difficult. It is Olympiacos. It is in Greece. So we don't know if it's going to be as easy as I think a lot of people think it will be. But either way, we will be back to let you know about that. In the meantime, do follow us on our socials. Give us a thumbs up. Leave us a review. It just helps us to grow even more. Thank you for listening to us throughout the season, and over and out.
A Bayard Chronicles production.
Sports Social Podcast Network.